Have you ever noticed how some women have this almost magical ability to stay in a man's mind long after they've gone? He can't stop thinking about her, replaying their interactions, wondering what she's doing. Now, you might be thinking it's just because she's incredibly beautiful or has some kind of special physical appeal, but that's not it at all. Because the truth is, the most unforgettable women aren't necessarily the most physically stunning. They're the ones who understand something deeper about human psychology and connection. You see, making a lasting impression on someone isn't about surface level attraction. It's about creating an emotional and psychological imprint that stays with him when you're not around. It's about understanding what makes the human mind fixate, what creates that sense of fascination that can't be shaken off. Think about it. Have you ever met someone who wasn't conventionally attractive, but somehow captivated your attention completely? Maybe it was their confidence, their unique perspective, or the way they made you feel seen in a way others didn't. That's because true psychological attraction is a full spectrum experience. It's not just about what a man sees when he looks at you. It's about what he feels, what he thinks about, what he craves when you're nowhere near him. And if you want to become the woman he thinks about constantly, if you want to create that lingering presence in his mind, then you need to understand the psychological triggers that create genuine, lasting fascination. That's what we're going to talk about today, because becoming the woman he can't stop thinking about isn't about chasing him, playing mind games, or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about understanding the subtle, powerful psychological principles that make someone unforgettable. So, if you're ready to discover how to create that lingering effect, if you're ready to understand how to tap into the psychology that makes a man think about you 24/7, let's break this down. I'm about to share with you 4 powerful psychological triggers that make a man think about you constantly, even when you're nowhere around. Because when you understand these principles, he won't just remember you, you'll become a thought he can't shake, a presence that lingers in his mind day and night. The first psychological principle is something I call mental space, and it's completely counterintuitive to what most women do. We assume that the more we give, the more available we make ourselves, the more a man will want us. But the truth is, psychological attraction isn't built through constant presence. It's built through mental space, that room you leave in someone's mind to think about you, to wonder about you, to anticipate you. Think about the last time you became completely fascinated with something. Maybe it was a TV show that ended on a perfect cliffhanger, or a conversation that was interrupted right at its most interesting point, or even a book you couldn't put down because each chapter left you needing to know what happens next. What made it so captivating? It wasn't that you got everything all at once. It was the gap, that space between knowing and not knowing, between having and wanting. That tension, that anticipation, that's what kept your mind engaged. And when it comes to making a man think about you constantly, understanding the power of mental space is absolutely crucial. Because here's what most women do. They meet a guy they like and they immediately try to solidify things. They text him constantly. They're always available when he reaches out. They share everything about themselves right away. They try to define the relationship as quickly as possible because they're afraid if they don't, he'll lose interest. That's the exact opposite of how the psychology of fascination works. The more predictable you are, the less his mind needs to engage with thoughts of you. The more completely known you are, the less his imagination works to fill in the gaps about who you are and what you're thinking. That's not to say you should be cold or distant or play childish games, but you do need to understand that fascination thrives in that space between moments of connection. One of the biggest mistakes people make in relationships is overexposure too soon. Imagine you're watching your favorite show, and instead of revealing the story bit by bit, they showed you every single plot twist, every character development, every surprise in the very first episode. Would you be excited to watch the rest? Probably not. The reason you keep watching is because your mind is engaged in the process of discovery, in the anticipation of what might happen next. It's the same with psychological attraction. If you give everything away immediately, if you're constantly available, if you're always the one texting first, if you're sharing your deepest thoughts right away, there's no mental space left for fascination to grow. There's no psychological pull to keep his mind coming back to thoughts of you. So how do you actually create this mental space in a way that feels authentic? One of the most powerful ways is through what psychologists call the Zeigarnik effect, our tendency to remember unfinished tasks and unresolved situations better than completed ones. When something feels incomplete, our minds keep returning to it, trying to find resolution. In practical terms, this means not always being the one who extends conversations longer. It means ending interactions while they're still enjoyable, not when they start to drag. It means being genuinely busy with your own fulfilling life rather than waiting around for his call. When a man senses that you have your own world that's rich and engaging, it creates a natural curiosity. He starts wondering, what is she doing? Who is she with? Why isn't she as available as other women I've dated? And that wondering, that's the beginning of psychological fixation. That's his mind creating a space for you, even when you're not physically present. Another powerful way to create mental space is through selective sharing. When you reveal interesting aspects of yourself gradually rather than all at once, you create what psychologists call information gaps, and the human mind is naturally driven to fill those gaps. This doesn't mean being mysterious for the sake of it or playing games with what you share. It means allowing the relationship to unfold naturally, letting him discover the different dimensions of who you are over time, rather than trying to prove your worth by revealing everything at once. Because when there's always something new to learn about you, always another layer to discover, his mind keeps coming back to you, trying to complete the picture. And perhaps most importantly, creating mental space means having a genuine understanding of your own value. Women who know their worth don't feel compelled to overcompensate, to over-explain, to be constantly available. They don't try to convince a man to want them. They simply live their lives in a way that makes a man want to be included. Think about the women you admire most, the ones who naturally draw people to them without seeming to try. They don't chase, they don't cling, they don't beg for attention. They exist fully in their own lives, and in doing so, they create a magnetic pull that makes people want to be closer to them. That's the energy you want to embody, because when you do, men will naturally start thinking about you more. They'll start wondering when they'll hear from you next. They'll start looking forward to the next time they see you. They'll start creating that mental space for you on their own, not because you're playing hard to get, but because they can sense you're a woman who isn't waiting around for anyone's validation. And nothing captures a man's thoughts more completely than a woman who seems complete without him. Now let's talk about the second psychological trigger that makes you linger in his mind: emotional novelty and contrast. When most people think about making an impression, they focus on being likable, being nice, agreeable, and consistent. But if you want to create a lasting psychological imprint, if you want him to think about you when you're not around, you need to understand a deeper truth about human psychology. Our minds don't fixate on what's predictable. They fixate on what's novel, what's varied, what contains contrast. Think about the people who have fascinated you most in your life. Were they completely predictable? Did they show you exactly the same side of themselves every time you met? Or were they multidimensional, sometimes serious, sometimes playful, sometimes vulnerable, sometimes strong? The people who capture our attention, who stay in our thoughts, are those who can't be easily categorized, who keep revealing new layers that surprise and intrigue us. This is what psychologists call distinctive encoding in the brain. When someone or something fits neatly into an existing category in our minds, we process it quickly and move on. But when someone shows contrast, when they don't fit neatly into our mental boxes, our brains work overtime trying to make sense of them. And that extra mental processing is what creates fascination. A guy can meet dozens of women who are consistently nice, consistently agreeable, consistently trying to make him like them. But when he meets a woman who embodies emotional contrast, who can be deeply intellectual in one conversation and playfully silly in the next, who can express bold confidence in one moment and touching vulnerability in another, she becomes impossible to forget because his mind can't file her away in a simple category. This doesn't mean you should be erratic or inauthentic. It's not about playing a role or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about allowing the full spectrum of who you really are to be expressed, rather than limiting yourself to the one-dimensional version you think he wants to see. Most of us naturally contain multitudes. We have serious sides and playful sides, intellectual depths and lighthearted humor, confidence and vulnerability. True fascination comes when you allow all these authentic parts of yourself to be seen. When a man encounters this kind of emotional richness, it creates a psychological hook that keeps bringing his thoughts back to you. He'll find himself wondering which side of you he'll see next. He'll be replaying your conversations, trying to understand the different dimensions you showed him. He'll be mentally engaged with the experience of you even when you're not physically present. One powerful way to create this psychological engagement is through what I call emotional plot twists, moments where you reveal a side of yourself that contrasts with what he's seen before. Maybe you've been having a deeply intellectual conversation and then you suddenly share something playfully personal that makes him laugh. Or perhaps you've been light and easygoing throughout an evening and then you express a passionate viewpoint about something that matters to you. These emotional plot twists aren't calculated games, they're authentic expressions of your multi-dimensional nature. But they have a profound psychological impact because they create what researchers call expectancy violations, moments that don't align with what someone thought they knew about you. And these expectancy violations are attention magnets. They force the mind to reconstruct its understanding, to pay closer attention, to remain engaged. Another aspect of this is intellectual chemistry, the ability to engage a man's mind in ways that surprise and challenge him. When a woman can shift between different conversational modes, when she can ask a thought-provoking question that makes him pause, then seamlessly move to something lighter, when she can challenge his perspective in a way that's intriguing rather than confrontational, it creates mental stimulation that becomes addictive. Men might be initially drawn to physical attraction, but what makes them think about a woman constantly, what makes them mentally obsessed, is the feeling that there's always more to discover. When a man feels like you stimulate him intellectually, when he feels like conversations with you are unlike conversations he has with anyone else, he'll find himself replaying those moments, anticipating the next one, creating mental space for you even when you're not around. The mistake most people make in relationships is that they try to be consistently pleasing rather than consistently interesting. They try to avoid any tension, any disagreement, any contrast, but in doing so, they become forgettable. Real psychological fixation isn't built on constant agreement. It's built on the electric charge that comes from engaging with someone who feels alive, multidimensional, and impossible to fully predict. If every interaction feels the same, if he always knows exactly what you're going to say, if there's never any contrast or surprise in how you express yourself, he won't feel that pull to keep thinking about you. But when you bring something unexpected, whether it's a perspective he hasn't considered, a side of yourself you haven't shown before, or a moment of connection that catches him off guard, it creates a mental bookmark. It makes him want to understand more, to see more, to experience more of who you are. Because here's the fundamental truth. Men don't become mentally obsessed with women they've completely figured out. They become obsessed with women they can't stop trying to figure out. Not because she's playing games, but because she genuinely contains multitudes. When you embody this kind of emotional richness and authentic contrast, his mind can never fully solve you. And what the mind can't solve, it obsesses over. Now, let's talk about the third psychological trigger that creates that lingering effect in his mind, sensory anchoring. This is where we go beyond just mental and emotional connection to something deeper, the way you engage his senses in a way that creates powerful, lasting impressions. See, attraction isn't just about what happens in conversation or the thoughts you share. It's about creating a full sensory experience that his brain automatically associates with you. Because our brains are wired to form strong connections between sensory inputs and emotional states, it's why a certain song can instantly transport you back to a specific memory, or why a particular scent can suddenly bring back feelings from years ago. When you understand how to create these sensory anchors, you're not just creating moments of connection, you're creating memory triggers that will automatically bring you to mind when you're not even there. Think about the experiences in your life that stand out most vividly. They're not just memories of what happened, they're memories of how it felt. They're memories that engage multiple senses, what you saw, what you heard, what you smelled, what you touched. That's what you want to create with a man you're interested in. You want to be the woman who lingers in his senses long after you've left the room. You want to be the scent he catches somewhere that immediately brings you to mind, the voice that echoes in his thoughts at random moments, the touch he can still feel even when you're not around. Let's start with something seemingly small but incredibly powerful: your signature scent. Scent is the sense most strongly tied to memory and emotion. It actually bypasses the thinking part of our brain and goes straight to the emotional center. That's why a certain fragrance can instantly trigger powerful feelings before you've even consciously identified what you're smelling. When you have a signature scent, something distinctive but not overpowering, it creates a subconscious connection in his mind. Every time he smells it, whether it's on you or somewhere else entirely, his brain instantly connects it to the emotional experience of being with you. This doesn't mean drowning yourself in perfume. Often the subtlest scents create the strongest impressions. The natural smell of your skin enhanced by a particular lotion, the lingering hint of your shampoo when you move your hair, a fragrance that's noticeable only when someone is already close to you. Then there's the power of touch, but not in the way most people think. The most psychologically impactful touches aren't the obvious ones. They're the almost not there touches that create anticipation and awareness. It's the moment when your hand brushes against his arm while making a point in conversation. It's the brief touch on his shoulder as you pass by him in a room. It's the way your fingers linger for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary when handing him something. These micro moments of physical connection create what psychologists call touch imprints, touch physical memories that can be recalled later with surprising vividness. Men don't just respond to touch, they remember it, they replay it, they anticipate it. If you're constantly in physical contact, always hugging or touching, it loses its psychological impact. But when these moments of connection are brief, intentional, and slightly unexpected, they create a physical memory that stays with him. Your voice is another powerful sensory tool that most women completely underestimate. The way you speak, the rhythm of your words, the variations in your tone, the moments when you slow down or speed up, creates an audio imprint that can echo in someone's mind long after the conversation has ended. Most people speak in a relatively flat, predictable pattern, which means their voice doesn't stand out in memory. But when you consciously vary your speech patterns, when you slow down slightly while making an important point, when you lower your voice just a bit when sharing something personal, when you let a smile come through in your voice while telling a story, you create audio bookmarks that make certain moments stand out. He might not remember every word you said, but you'll remember how your voice made him feel at specific moments. And then there's visual distinctiveness, the small, authentic elements that make you visually memorable. This isn't about trying to look perfect or changing your appearance. It's about having signature elements that become associated with you in his mind. Maybe it's a particular way you smile with your eyes when you're genuinely amused, or a characteristic gesture you make when you're explaining something you're passionate about, or even a specific accessory that becomes part of your identity. These visual anchors become mental photographs that a man returns to when thinking about you. They're the images that pop into his mind randomly throughout his day. They're what he sees when he closes his eyes and thinks about you. The real power comes when you combine these sensory elements during emotionally significant moments. When an important conversation happens while your signature scent is present, when a meaningful glance is exchanged as your hand lightly touches his arm, when your voice takes on that distinctive quality as you share something that matters to you, these multi-sensory experiences create memory imprints that are nearly impossible to forget. And here's the beautiful thing. None of this requires you to be anything other than authentically yourself. It's not about manipulating someone's senses or playing games. It's about being intentional with the natural sensory experience you already create. It's about understanding that we connect with people through all our senses, not just through words or ideas. The women who leave the deepest impressions, who create that lingering effect that keeps a man thinking about them 24/7, aren't necessarily the most conventionally beautiful or the most outgoing. They're the ones who understand how to engage all the senses, who create experiences that feel different from everyday interactions, who leave sensory bookmarks that trigger thoughts of them again and again. Because ultimately, when a man can't stop thinking about you, it's not just because of what you said or did, it's because you created a full sensory experience that his mind returns to automatically. The distinctive scent that was uniquely you, the light touch that sent electricity through him, the sound of your voice changing as you shared something personal, the visual memory of how you looked in a moment of genuine connection. These aren't just memories, they're sensory anchors that keep pulling his thoughts back to you even when you're not there. Even if there's one psychological trigger that makes a man crave you in a way that never fades, it's what I call self-contained confidence. Listen, confidence isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's not about being perfect or never showing vulnerability. Confidence is about how comfortable you are in your own skin, how completely you accept and own who you are. When a woman embodies this kind of self-contained confidence, it creates a magnetic pull that's almost impossible to resist. It's the way she can sit in silence and still hold his attention. It's the way she doesn't need constant validation, but when she gives it, it means something. It's the way she enters a room and owns her space, not by demanding attention, but by simply being comfortable with her own presence. This kind of quiet self-assurance creates what psychologists call a validation paradox. The less you need someone's approval, the more they want to earn it. When you don't need a man's attention to feel good about yourself, when your sense of worth comes from within rather than from external validation, you become infinitely more valuable in his eyes. He starts working to earn your interest rather than you working to maintain his. True confidence isn't about pretending to be perfect. In fact, one of the most attractive forms of confidence is the ability to acknowledge your flaws without being defined by them. When a woman can laugh at herself, when she can admit when she's wrong without it shattering her sense of self, when she can be vulnerable without needing to be rescued, that's when a man sees someone truly exceptional. Most women make the mistake of thinking they need to hide their imperfections, to always appear flawless, to never show any signs of insecurity. But that creates a distance, a sense that you're performing rather than connecting. Real confidence, the kind that makes a man think about you constantly, is the confidence to be authentic, to show your whole self, to be comfortable with both your strengths and your weaknesses. And here's the psychological reason this is so powerful. When someone is genuinely self-assured, when they don't need constant reassurance or validation, they create a sense of safety for those around them. A man doesn't have to worry about constantly managing your emotions or walking on eggshells. He doesn't feel the pressure of being responsible for your self-esteem. Instead, he feels free to be himself, to be authentic, to connect with you on a deeper level. This creates what relationship psychologists call secure attachment, the healthiest, most addictive form of connection. When a man feels secure with you, when he doesn't have to guess at your feelings or manage your insecurities, he becomes more invested, more present, more consistently engaged with the relationship. And when he's not with you, his mind naturally returns to that feeling of security, that sense of being accepted and valued for who he is. The energy that comes from this kind of self-contained confidence is intoxicating. It's not about being aloof or distant. It's about being so completely grounded in your own worth that you can be fully present, fully engaged, fully connected without fear. You can give your complete attention to someone without needing anything in return. You can express interest without it being clouded by need. You can be vulnerable without it feeling like a risk. When a woman radiates this kind of self-assuredness, it creates a pull that's impossible to resist, because ultimately men don't just become addicted to women, they become addicted to the way a woman makes them feel about themselves. When your confidence allows a man to feel accepted, respected, and valued in a way that doesn't demand he earn it through constant performance, it creates a psychological safe harbor he'll want to return to again and again. Making a guy think about you 24/7 isn't about being the hottest woman he's ever seen. It's not about playing mind games or using manipulation tactics. It's about creating an experience that he doesn't want to live without, an experience of mental space that keeps his mind engaged, emotional contrast that keeps him intrigued, sensory anchoring that keeps you present in his senses, and self-contained confidence that makes him feel secure and valued. When you master these psychological principles, you become unforgettable. You become the woman he craves, not just in the moment, but in a way that lingers. A woman he doesn't just want to be with, but one he feels he needs in his life, because that's the lingering effect, not just being attractive, but being irreplaceable in how you impact his mind, his emotions, and his sense of self. Now let me bring all this together. Creating that lingering effect in a man's mind, becoming the woman he thinks about constantly, isn't about tricks or manipulation. It's about understanding fundamental psychological principles that make human connections truly meaningful and memorable. When you create mental space, you're giving his mind room to develop thoughts and feelings about you on its own. You're triggering that natural psychological tendency to fill in gaps, to wonder, to anticipate. That mental engagement is what keeps you present in his thoughts, even when you're physically absent. When you embody emotional contrast, you're allowing the full spectrum of your authentic self to be expressed. You're creating that distinctive psychological encoding that makes you impossible to categorize and forget. You're giving him something his mind can't simply process and move past. You're giving him an ongoing puzzle that keeps his thoughts returning to you again and again. When you master sensory anchoring, you're creating memory triggers that automatically bring you to mind without any conscious effort on his part. A certain scent, a particular quality of touch, the distinctive sound of your voice, a visual memory that stands out. These sensory bookmarks become pathways that lead his thoughts directly back to you throughout his day. And when you cultivate that self-contained confidence, you're creating an emotional safety and security that becomes psychologically addictive. You're showing him that real connection doesn't have to be fraught with insecurity or performance. You're giving him the rare experience of being with someone who is complete in herself, who chooses him rather than needs him. These psychological triggers don't work in isolation. They work together to create that lingering effect that makes you unforgettable. It's not about being perfect or flawless. It's not about being the most beautiful woman he's ever seen. It's about engaging his mind, his emotions, his senses in a way that creates an imprint that stays with him. Think about the women throughout history who have had that magnetic quality, that ability to captivate and fascinate. They weren't all conventional beauties. They weren't all outgoing or flamboyant. What they had in common was this understanding, sometimes intuitive, sometimes deliberate, of these psychological principles that create deep, lasting impressions. The lingering effect doesn't come from desperately trying to hold someone's attention. It comes from being so completely yourself, so confidently, authentically, multidimensionally yourself, that you create an experience unlike any other. It comes from understanding the psychology of attraction at a level most people never reach. When you master mental space, emotional contrast, sensory anchoring, and self-contained confidence, you become more than just someone he's attracted to. You become a thought he can't shake, a feeling he wants to return to, a presence that stays with him even when you're not there. That's the lingering effect, and it's the most powerful form of attraction there is.